represent a tumor of the system that we inhabit, it would be Wall Street, the stock exchanges, and the banking establishment as a whole. But again, the tumors are not actually the source of this disease. They are symptoms. Symptoms, just as the rampant foreclosures forcing people out of their homes, are symptoms. Symptoms like the ongoing economic decline and loss of so-called growth are symptoms. Symptoms like the ongoing debt crisis that has yet to fully hit America, by the way, but has already taken its toll in the EU, Greece, Italy, Portugal, and many others. And obviously no resolution has been found. Why? Because they're trying to resolve the problems that have been generated within this system by using mechanisms of this system. You notice our governments continue to bail out banks across the world, yet they impose austerity on us. Is that a result of something negative? Are these people just evil? Are they just trying to do the worst they can to insult the humanity of us? Are they just corrupt, greedy criminals, anomalies? Are they aliens from another planet that have come down to fuck with us? Well, they're people, exactly. And they're likely manifestations of this cancer rather than a cause of it.
Yes, buddy.
And as the world awakens to this financial system and its flaws, I've noticed a very radical perspective slowly being realized, which transcends the economic tradition many of us assume to be natural to our way of life. You'll notice that we tend to assume that the systems we're born into, the traditional systems, are automatically assumed to be empirical. Have you ever noticed that? You might look at politics and government as we know it as a whole and assume that it's valid. Why? Because that's all we've ever known. Is it a true measure of logic? Probably not. It's simply tradition. It's custom. And you'll find that we seem to be locked into custom frames of reference than emergent frames of reference. And that is fundamentally what needs to change in our view of reality.
Thanks for picking that up.
We might look at the market system and our use of money, for example, and assume it will always be there, right? Not because of any benchmark of our, earthly economic measure of what it truly means to be sustainable, not because of any scientific realization of what human behavior actually entails and how we tend to act based on what's reinforced in our culture, but simply because that's all we've ever known. However, as the biosocial pressures, as they're called, continue to grind down, say, the global workforce, as, machine automation continues to replace human labor for the benefit of saving corporations money, reducing purchasing power, your money, and hence inevitably stifling economic growth, our perspective might just grow a little bit larger than the traditional norms we've come to understand. Maybe, just maybe, human employment for income as we know it, something that I've heard in rhetoric, a lot of people complaining about, where's our jobs? Maybe, just maybe, the foundation of our entire economic system simply isn't going to work anymore because we realize the non-stop effects of science and technology, hence the emergent nature of reality clashing with our traditional assumptions. And perhaps even with the expanding debt crisis born, guess what, out of the fractional reserve lending system and the structural reality that money is actually created out of debt and sold as a commodity in exchange for interest that can only come into existence, yes, through the creation of more loan sales and hence the creation of more money. Maybe, just maybe, the debt collapses aren't the result of some political policy or some corporate or government malfeasance. Maybe they are the result of the actual structural form of the system that we inhabit. And with the psychology of growth and consumption, a psychology that continues to create the ongoing social and environmental destruction that we see, abuse and exploitation all around us, that so many environmentalists complain about, but yet they still tend to not realize that the system is based on that. It's defined by consumption. It's defined by turnover. And we often think that corporations should be held responsible for their actions because of their abuse of this nature, when in fact the competitive market model of economics demands that behavior. Again, it's structural.
Fix it.
You know, how is it in a world that's supposed to be economizing? What is the definition of an economy? It means the management of a household. What does that mean? It implies that you have to be thrift. It means you economize. It means you save. It means you're strategic in what you do. How is an economy based on consumption to maintain your employment, economizing it all? Obviously, it's a complete anti-economy. You know, it's time we consider amongst all of this that the problems that we're seeing, that all of us are here about, are actually systemically rooted in the core structure of what defines our economic system and the psychology that is created, supported, and rewarded. I keep hearing the phrase in the Occupy movement, we are the 99%. And while I understand and admire that communicative gesture, I would like to expand back and think about this a little bit more technically. I think it's a little more accurate to say we're not the 99%. We're actually the 100%.
Right.
And all of us are to blame. The only reason the 1% have what they do is because the 99% have been supported by the only reason the 1% have what they do is because the 99% continues to support all the elements that fuel the wealth of the 1%. The system is literally designed to support the 1% over the 99. The values that we see in our culture are designed to make sure you aspire to those that maintain the role of the 1%. It's called the American dream, remember? The American dream, which only exists for the 1%, and always did. You know, the success of us is often measured in our material wealth, or how we gain admiration in the culture, our dignity defined by what others think of us. Is that true success? No, that is a false, distorted value that came from a system that needed to be based on everyone being acquisitive, competitive, cutthroat, and essentially inhumane. The historical illusion, I have to point out, which continues to this day, which I know is manifest in a lot of gestures here in this audience and across the world, rightfully so, however, but it's still an illusion, is that there is some person or some group that is explicitly to blame, rather than focus on the fact that the 1% of the world's population has over 40% of the planet's wealth. Let's instead ask ourselves the question, how is that even possible? How is that even possible that our system allows for such a thing? Do we really have grounds to be surprised at the way the world is operating when the very foundation of what motivates the current social order is taken into account? Should we really be surprised at all? What is the economy? I ask the question. The monetary market model at work in the world means that through the movement of money, power and property can be bought and sold at will within the confines of, say, legal legislation. Legal legislation, by the way, which, yes, is for sale in the open market. Just as all politicians are for sale in the open market. Just as all administration's policies in general are for sale in the open market, what did you expect when the whole system is based upon the buying and selling of property and power and hence influence? There is no escape from the influence of money with respect to governmental policy. Why? Because government in this system is nothing more than a business. That's all it can be. And I hope that can become clear in the minds of many. And see the true root of change has to be beyond the lobbying for government to do things within our favor. It has to go deeper. And again, while people in the world continue to protest this system, they come up with such terms as corporatism and crony capitalism and even fascism to highlight the legal reality, for example, that yes, businesses can influence all legislations through what's called corporate lobbying. Yet it's legal. Well, why wouldn't it be? Again, this is what this system is. It's those that seem to impose the assumption that this system is something that it isn't that continues to bother me. This system was always fascist at its very origin. It just took this long for the root of it to rise to the top because the cancer continues to grow. And now the social immune system is noticing it. And that's the only difference. You know what creates jobs in the world today? Problems. Everyone talks about labor again. You know what really creates jobs? Problems. In an efficient world, there will be less of a need for all of us to be employed or to engage in any type of long-term action that we would consider a job. People will learn to be satisfied and not greedy. They will learn to understand their relationship with the environment. The system of progress will be less and less need to resolve problems, not more and more being generated, which is what we're doing today. In other words, there is an empirical decoupling from what actually supports life on this planet and the scientific reality that we inhabit and have been learning about. It's built right in. The monetary market system at its core must change, not the policies that regulate it. On a different level, just to throw this in, for those that have never thought about the fact that the entire structure of our economy is intrinsically flawed. There is a term that was used by a man named, excuse me a second. Actually, let me start again. There's a culturally hegemonic attribute of this system that goes unnoticed. For example, if you have $1 million and you put it into a bank account, a CD investment at 4% interest, you will make $40,000 a year for doing what? However, if you take loans to buy your home and you need to take out credit, as it's called, you're paying interest in. And guess where that interest goes? It goes to fuel the 1% or those with the wealth that have the ability to actually deposit money and make money off of it. Am I the only one that sees the hegemonic flaw in that? Yet you rarely see a sign being held up defending or defining the interest system. You rarely see people say, why do we even have interest to begin with? It's one of those things that goes unnoticed. It's the interest of the 1%, but we all seem to think it's okay and normal. This is the problem. No one's realizing what the structural problem actually is. They don't realize the reinforcement they are doing to actually continue this system, while on the other side of their awareness they think they're fighting them. In fact, I'll say this. The values that comprise our culture today are what actually support the higher level classes and systematically repress them without them even knowing it. As I began to say earlier, in the 1960s, a man named Stokely Carmichael, a famous activist, coined a very important phrase called institutional racism. This was referring now to how unnoticed underlying policies and structures within the social system undermined African American prosperity and equality. What we have today is a mere variation. It's institutional classism. And it is equally a civil rights issue as anything else that has ever existed. Coming back to the nature of Occupy Wall Street, Wall Street itself, as we know, which is the ultimate manifestation of the pursuit of money as a commodity rather than any form of true creation or social contribution, is naturally ripe for symbolic objection, for at a minimum, it shouldn't exist at all, and most certainly not have the grand effect it does on the stability of our economy today. However, that being stated, it must again be made clear that Wall Street and the banking system are not the source of our problems. They are only symptoms of a larger order economic cancer which will continue to not only create more imbalance, but will completely eventually fail by its own gravity and its outdated assumptions of our human conduct and its false environmental relationships. What we are seeing in the world today is, in my view, the beginning of the end when it comes to the protest movements that have been started.
Let's go see Mama.